How do you deal with a person who is full of confidence but knows nothing? Basically a stupid person. Give them small jobs but make them sound super important. I was once sober caring for a friend who was super drunk, crying about inconsequential stuff and had been vomiting for an hour. A slightly less drunk friend of my super drunk friend was trying to help her too. He kept getting in my way, dropping her hair in her own vomit and taking her drunken crying why too seriously. All the while with this insufferable I know what's best attitude that can only come from a drunk person. While I was trying to cheer her up, he kept legitimizing whatever she was crying about. Oh my god babes, you dropped a glass. Oh my god, I love that glass. I know it doesn't feel like it right now but there will be other glasses. Plus he kept telling her to stick her fingers down her throat to induce even more vomiting once it had subsided. When I suggested that drinking a glass of water might be more helpful he went, no, trust me. Dramatic pause. I used to be bulimic, which is obviously super relevant to this situation. In the end I ended up asking him to keep other people out of the bathroom. I just couldn't do that on my own and it needed his type of special skill set. He happily trotted off to do his very important job and I could finally get my friend partway sober, out of the bathroom, into her PJs and into bed. None of which would have been possible with him around. I'm gonna give a serious answer to this. It depends on the circumstances and your relationship with them. Things that can change how I interact with them is the level of stupidity they are exhibiting. If they're in a position of authority over me, boss at work, commanding officer, teacher, if they're a decent person as opposed to an butthole, if they're very young and still learning, if there's actually something important at stake in the interaction like someone's health or money, and a lot of other things, the list is quite long. If there's a chance of educating them, I'll try and do it, but will be prepared to quickly abandon ship if it's clear that's going nowhere. This works well on Facebook where there's an awful lot of stupidity and unfounded information posted by an awful lot of people. If the interaction is not important now or in the future, I just minimize my interactions as much as possible. I politely or, if they're really being a jerk, impolitely leave the interaction. A polite way I use is well, we really strongly disagree on this, and I don't think we can change each other's minds, so how about we just move on? If they've a right to instruct or tell me what to do and I know they're wrong, how I answer depends on how important whatever they're telling me to do is. If I really disagree with it and I can get away with it, I ask them are you sure and to tell me in writing to cover my butt if that's an option. And I don't do that in front of other people because that just gets them all defensive. The trick is to know when it's worth continuing the interaction and when it's not, and to not get out quickly if it's the latter. I'm currently training people who are just out of college at a Fortune 250 company. Effectively dealing with this type of person is essentially my day-to-day profession. First, figure out why they have the false confidence. Sometimes it's a defense or compensation mechanism trying to mask self-esteem issues. Sometimes it's just due to having not had any real challenges in life yet. In the first case, you're going to want to help set them up for scenarios that they can win and feel genuine confidence about. Once actual confidence has been developed, then their ego will typically be able to take the hit from future feedback. In the second case, as was mentioned, frame everything as a question. Be sure you have the correct answers ready with supporting material to show how you got there and how they can get there in the future. Be understanding of incorrect answers. Second, recognize that the person has value. Even if they are stupid, you're probably dealing with these people in a professional or educational environment. Otherwise, why deal with them at all? So if you're required to be there and they are as well, recognize that their time is just as valuable as yours. Respect them. Showing respect is the best way to get people on your side and to drop any sort of bluster or whatnot. Third, set expectations. Make sure that your expectations are very clearly stated. If they are a stupid person, don't assume that they will understand the implications of any information that you give them. Those tips seem to work well for me. Socratic method. Bro. Ask them questions which will ultimately demonstrate to themselves that they are not as smart as they seem. They'll never listen if you tell them something, but if you ask questions that led them to contradict themselves, you have a higher chance of getting them to see the bigger picture. Also, you probably aren't going to convince them they're wrong, but you will convince others that they are wrong. The real problem with the world is that intelligent people are full of doubts, while stupid people are full of confidence. Charles Bukowski. Bertrand Russell said it first, and better imo. The trouble with the world is that the stupid are cocksure and the intelligent are full of doubt. If you had to summarize Reddit in one line, that is it. What I always do is basically you start a conversation and lead him or her into the point where they are questioning their knowledge about the topic they are so confident about. For example, play dumb and let them try to explain it to you Life 5 style and they will realize they don't know anything about it. Or they will get frustrated, but instead of realizing how ignorant they might be, they instead think you're the idiot. Rarely have I come across a person that fits this topic that actually changed their mind for the better. You can't. They cannot fathom their own stupidity in the majority of cases. Nope, you are not. The people we are talking about would never accept or correct their mistake. If someone gilds me for this response, I will delete this account. He was so young. Let them fail, then show them the correct method. That's all you can do. Failure brings humility. It won't work right away, but when it adds up and they're about to get fired, fail the course, get dumped, whatever, they are closer to having a change of heart. Man, this just happened the other day with a friend of mine. He argued that homicide rates were significantly higher today than they ever have been. Even though I gave him plenty of evidence saying otherwise, he just wouldn't believe it. He said Chicago was proof enough of his point, because they have such a high homicide rate. Oh, and of course violent video games causes violence. Within a few minutes he started just yelling instead of having a nice debate. So that kind of proves he knows nothing. Indeed, this is the most typical scenario. They don't care about truth. They care about themselves and how they look in a social setting. It's selfish, really. Knew a guy in Cospman A school, Navy medic, who knew without any conceivable doubt that he would one day be a Navy SEAL. I too wanted to be a SEAL, still do, and had tried getting a contract before boot camp by training and testing with an active duty SEAL. All of my scores were good except my run, so no contract. I asked my friend about what steps he was taking to train, if he'd tested with a SEAL when he was in DEP, pre-boot camp program, what his swim time was, if he'd read any SEAL books, I've read scores, etc. He looked at me like I had bugs crawling out of my ears. He thought it was a matter of him being chosen due to his desire to be an assassin, and they'd train him with the same dramatic flair as in some samurai movie or anime. He was huge into anime, as are a lot of young sailors. He knew nothing on the practicality of the process. Later, at field medical training, basically Marine Corps Boot Camp Junior at Camp Pendleton, he did okay in all aspects except the hikes. 2, 4, 6, and 8 mile hikes carrying 70-80 pounds of gear. The 4, 6 and 8 hikes were done on steep hills. He only passed the 2 mile, when he would be mocked by classmates about still wanting to be a SEAL. He'd retort, incorrectly, that they only trained with 40-pound packs. He said this because in one video, BUD/S trainees are seen running 10 miles with 40-pound packs. That was a conditioning run for them, not an actual patrol training evolution, and they were running. We walked on our hikes. Needless to say, he did not graduate field medical. He also lost his desire to be a SEAL. No one had more confidence than him though. He just didn't have the knowledge. At least the military can weed these people out. In the corporate world he could be your boss now. I'm a carpenter, non-union, and you wouldn't believe how many of these types of guys you encounter sell themselves as the ultimate jack of all trades, and then take 6 hours to do something ridiculously basic like a drywall patch. When you challenge them on it, they make the most outrageous excuses. Yesterday my co-worker spent the whole day complaining that he wished our boss had explained something a few days earlier, even though we still haven't even gotten to that task. When I asked why, he explained that somebody at his skill level has to put a lot of thought into potential solutions, and he wouldn't have had to waste his time deep in thought if he had known there would be a solution. I told him it's a pretty standard industry technique and there wasn't much to think about, but he insisted that when you're as good as him, you always need to be ahead of the game. Fair enough, but he explained all of this while he was framing up a wall about 3 inches out of plumb. A lot of guys don't last very long in this industry. There was a good tip on the front page yesterday that suggested asking people what was the best counter-argument to their belief position. This tactic appeals to their confidence in being able to volunteer the possible weakness of their perspective and can be effective at prompting self-awareness. I usually get there isn't one. Don't underestimate just how much of an unstoppable juggernaut this combination can make a person. Someone who is wholly unaware of themselves isn't going to be limited by their conscience or an understanding of consequences. My advice is to get out of their way and hope they fall into a hole they can't get out of. It depends from person to person. Here's a list of ways I deal. Silence. Between Mark Twain and the Bible. Proverbs 26:4. There are plenty of ways of saying only fools argue with fools. Avoid inflammatory topics, like Thanksgiving dinner with the family. Diversionary tactics. If the stupid person in question seems completely intent on educating me about their opinion, I try to take as many chances as I can to divert their attention, or divert the subject. Complete and utter destruction. If the point they are trying to make is not only unsafe, but completely and utterly wrong, I will shatter every notion and ask them to prove, against me and a large amount of money, that I am wrong and they are right. I will even whip out my phone and Google some research points if necessary. If it's someone I see every day and can't avoid conversations with, and inevitably another inflammatory topic comes up, I poke the bear. This means I throw out a few facts and figures, or maybe I'll make use of hypotheticals, which, more often than not, destroy the conversation because they can't handle the mere suggestion of being wrong. I'll continue poking until I get tired, then I resort to diversionary tactics, or what could be called a tactical retreat. Very rarely, I will try to employ the Socratic method. This tends to really piss stupid people off, because they think you're being condescending or patronizing, which, let's be honest, you are, because they are being stupid. I only do this when I am sure the stupid person in question won't get violent. I'll let them explain their whole point of view, even going so far as to engage with them on what they think is an empathetic and understanding level. Then, when they're done, I laugh and tell them they're wrong, and that they're dumb, after which I proceed to just ignore them. I ask them questions, upon questions, upon questions, like a toddler, but why eventually they'll get as frustrated as I do when I have to listen to their bulls. I mean, realistically speaking, anyone who refuses to see reason when confronted with reality are highly unlikely to change their minds just because I say so. It's one of those my opinions require little facts to prove. But if you have an opposing opinion, you better have your master's thesis ready with 3 pages of bibliography with accredited resources, along with an entire internet website also using accredited resources that many people subscribe to because they also agree with your opinion. And those people better also be forward-thinking contemporaries of whose opinions I respect. That sort of person is someone I've come to describe as brick wall. Okay, so first you want to make sure you're not that person. I've met very few people who are so completely wrong as to fit your description. Statistically, it's more likely you're that person if you've met a lot of them. Second, you want to try to understand their viewpoint. Dig beyond the obvious to really place yourself in their shoes and see why they think the way they do. Next, you want to locate the logical inconsistency in their arguments, making sure to follow the tenets of formal logic yourself. Be sure not to attribute any logical errors you find to the person rather than the viewpoint. Every argument should be evaluated on its own merits. Lastly, when you've properly performed the previous 3 steps and you're sure you're still dealing with a moron, is to stop interacting with that person as much as possible. If they are your co-workers, try to work around them. Your opinion should be widely shared if they are indeed as you think. If they are your boss, then find a new job. I have never found anyone that has made it through all 3 preliminary steps yet. I had a friend who was an absolute big-headed T. He claims to know crap he doesn't know, and then when asked about that topic he blanks out. He blatantly copies others in tests, exams, even in the freaking GCSEs, exams taken in UK, and doesn't admit to it. Talks about how he enjoys studying, which is absolutely balls because he just says this to be the center of attention and to stand out. I just stopped talking to that overconfident piece of crap. BTW, as an introvert I could not have the guts to ever actually say any of this to him. As someone who is moderately intelligent but has extreme social anxiety and, apparently, a constant please help me look on my face all the time, some of the biggest morons I meet decide they are going to be my best friend. How do I deal with it? I bottle it up. While they take me under their wing and try to big brother me, I just grow more and more annoyed. Slowly I succumb to passive aggression, until finally there is a blow up where I call them a moron and they get looks on their faces like I just kicked their dog, their mother, and their pregnant wife at the same time. It's a long process. It takes some serious work. You need to avoid two things: getting labeled as the opposition in their mind, and damaging their ego. The first will lead to getting stonewalled just on principle so they can win. The second will cause internal conflicts in their heads, which will shut down any possibility of change in their viewpoints. The first things to do to avoid these is to get them to consider you part of their team. Find areas of agreement. I don't care on what. Build a rapport around areas of agreement. This builds their ego and also their impression of you. Second, guide the conversation to some things that are contradictory to the relevant topic, but that you think you can get agreement on. Do this before ever touching on the topic that matters to you. Third, work towards the relevant topic, but in a questioning manner. Do it in a can you help me understand kind of way. Remember how we already found agreement on something that is contradictory? Use that to show confusion and create questions. Use this process to work together, side by side, not head to head, if that makes sense towards the truth of the matter. Figuring out the right answer should be a reward for both of you that you accomplish together. Through all of this, always leave them an out. Somehow them being wrong is either never brought up, or it's not their fault. Preserve their ego. Do not attack it, ever. As soon as you do, you're done. Serious question. How do you know if you are stupid? Often I think I am above average intelligence, but then wonder how would you really know? Does someone with Downs or another mental disorder know they are handicapped? Or does the world seem the exact same way it does to me but people are nicer? I mean, I always fight with myself that maybe I'm the stupid one, but I'm retarded so I don't actually know I'm retarded. I could be boxed in a loony bin right now in a straitjacket, but the world I'm in is just an imaginary world in my head. How do you know? I solve a lot of issues and fix other people's mistakes at work. It's my job, but maybe they are easy mistakes because I'm handicapped and the mistakes are on purpose and I'm an equal opportunity employee. IDK man. It keeps me up at night. How do I know I'm not in a crappy fantasy world procured in my head? Best thing to do in that situation is just enjoy the humor in it, because you won't convince them otherwise. Most amusing characteristic of this type is that they can argue with something you already agree with them about. If you hold an opinion or state something that implies their viewpoint, they might not connect the dots and argue with you about it. At that point, it's best to just appreciate the situation. I have a friend like that. Whenever someone tries to educate him or show him why his opinions are so dead wrong it hurts. He locks up and asks to change the subject so that he remains in a state of self-affirming blissful ignorance. And it is painful to watch. Dealing with ignorance is like fighting with strong wind. You can't win. I like to call it arrogant ignorance. You won't change them. You can't make them see the light. You need to be patient like with children. Like children they are easily manipulated. If you are as much smarter than them as you think you are, you should be able to be patient and through small ideas and suggestions get them to think do what you want. My mate is like this. Although it's almost more book smart but lacking common sense, and yet has confidence in both. He was telling me about this great job he was applying for and he'd be taking home £45,000 a year if he got it, masters in engineering graduate. Well, you won't be taking home that if that's the salary though, will you? Yes, I will, that's my salary. But tax? What tax? 20-minute conversation later and he is left sulking about how it's unfair that he'd take home less than his salary. It knocked him down a peg or two. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.